What's going on, everybody? I hope you're having an incredible day. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at DreamRare. That's at DreamRare. You can follow me on Twitter at Legendary Energy. Check out my website, legendary.vision. It's got a new podcast, Rare Talk Podcast, a bunch of other links. And I'm going to wait about 5 or 10 more seconds for people to get in. And I want to talk about a news story, and I touched on some stuff earlier. I'm going to talk about it more here because Pandora's box has truly been opened, and like almost every situation in America, the box has been opened where before we were talking about nothing, and now we're talking about everything to the point where almost nothing is going to matter at this rate if we don't have any sort of integrity and respect within journalism. As I found out this year, I've always thought, oh my gosh, the New York Times and the Washington Post, they must be real organizations, they must be the real deal, until I saw the New York Times and the Washington Post lie about, the Russian power grid. Turned out to be a fake story. They said 17 intelligence agencies for 6 months and then retracted it and barely told anybody. I found out that they weren't actual unbiased news organizations, that everything's ridiculously biased. CNN is 1,000% slanted. Washington Post is, a little bit less, but almost 1,000% slanted. New York Times is slanted. MSNBC is slanted. Of course, Fox has this bias, but you're talking about almost every single mainstream media organization, and then there's Fox News. So you tell me what has a bigger influence when it comes to media and social media. So for a backstory, before people get into it, me personally, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I registered Democrat to vote for Bernie Sanders. Turned out, he didn't turn out to be who I thought he was. So now I'm like, back to not really caring. I don't really care about this Republican race or whatever, so I don't have a bunch of chips in it, but I will tell you that the race was between Roy Moore and Luther Strange, and what was very impressive was that Luther Strange was the establishment candidate. He was who Mitch McConnell wanted. Donald Trump even supported him, maybe to a favor to Mitch McConnell, but all the Trump supporters and all of the Republican or right momentum, they all liked Roy Moore, and they knew not to vote for Luther Strange. Luther Strange was who the establishment wanted, your GOP rhinos, your John McCains, your Mitch McConnells, and Roy Moore was who the people wanted. So Roy Moore won the election, even against all of the millions of dollars that they were spending and promotions. So you have, once again, similar to this election, you have a non-establishment candidate beating out an establishment candidate. And as I've seen with the election, the establishment media and the establishment politicians, they will do anything under the sun. They will cheat, they will lie, they will steal. They will do anything to stop whatever they don't want to happen. They're never going to say I'm wrong. They're never going to say I'm sorry. So Roy Moore, all of a sudden, 2 days ago, he's accused, oh my God, 50 years ago when Roy Moore was 30, the guy's 70 now. You're talking about when he was in his 30s. A woman comes out and accuses him and says, oh my goodness, when I was 17, Roy Moore, sexually assaulted me or did something bad. And I'm like, wow, that's awful if it's true. But first of all, any sort of common sense, while I've said a million times, I'm a huge advocate against real rape and real sexual assault. It's a huge deal, and I'm sure it does happen a lot. I know it does. I try to help as much as I can against it, but Roy Moore just beat an establishment candidate, so it was hard for me to believe right off the bat. It's like, oh, he beats who John McCain and Mitch McConnell don't want. Oh, all of a sudden, he did something with a girl 50 years ago, and she just decided to speak up after he won. Like, if he didn't win, I guarantee nothing would ever have been said, because it's not about justice, it's not about equality, it's about, like I've said a bunch, it's about the establishment media, the establishment politicians, and who they want in power, and they'll throw a fit. So what comes out today, a very non-shocking to anybody with half a brain and common sense, the biggest accuser of Roy Moore is Deborah Gibson. And who is Deborah Gibson but a huge Democrat who worked with Hillary Clinton's campaign as a sign language interpreter, and she's also worked with Joe Biden's campaign. And she's been quoted saying, one of the things that Hillary Clinton does is that she'll say, you know what, if standing up for equal pay is playing the women's card, then deal me in. So deal me in. She's a huge Hillary Clinton supporter, huge Joe Biden and Democrat supporter, and right after what's it called? Right after Roy Moore wins, then all of a sudden the news is saying, oh, he did this, but the biggest accuser is a Hillary Clinton basically employee and worked with Joe Biden. And here's how I'll tell you. People always ask, what news do you trust? Unfortunately, I'm a very trustworthy person. I'm not like a paranoid person. But I don't trust any of the news sources because I've studied them for a year. Every day, I'll read and research and see everything they're saying. I look at the headline, I read all the content, and I've realized what dishonest, lying, for lack of a better term, scumbags a lot of them are. Because you're talking about rape, you're talking about sexual assault, you're talking about politics, you're talking about the future of America and the future of foreign relations. This is not some light stuff. So I will say scumbags because they are huge scumbags for not even having an ounce of accountability, for not even having a shred of integrity, for letting journalism get destroyed. But I knew I had a hunch that they were lying about the Roy Moore situation because in every article that I saw, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, they all said might. They didn't say, if they knew for sure that Roy Moore, and they do this all the time, they say, we have an anonymous source and it maybe happened and maybe didn't, or, 17 intelligence agencies said that you could tell based on their tone and their text and whatnot. I read it all. Even the ones attacking Roy Moore weren't saying he definitely did it. They were saying he might have done it, and if he did do it, he needs to step down. And they've been ramping that up over the next few days. John McCain's like, if you did it, step down. All the Republicans, if you did, of course, if you did something to that degree, step down. But why are even his biggest accusers and his biggest enemies as far as the media saying, we don't know that he did it, but if he did, he has to step. That's how they frame everything. And to be honest, unfortunately, things are so polarized that 90% of the right will agree with anything that goes Republican. And, if it's anti-Democrat or it's anti-Harvey Weinstein or it's anti-Hollywood, people will believe anything. They're not really looking for context most of the time. When it comes to the left, which I've been outspoken against because in my opinion have been far, far worse over the past year to the point of like disturbing levels. If anything is anti-Trump, if anything is anti-Republican, and if anything is anti-conservative or anti-Christian or anti-anything that, somebody in Texas would like or somebody with, common sense would like, they're going to scream against it. So, of course, you have all the big news sources. And the really unfortunate thing about this is, one, is this what's going to happen every time, like, a real person wins an election against, like, a Mitch McConnell, a Paul Ryan, a Hillary Clinton? Are we going to scream bloody murder and make up accusations from 50, 60 years ago to the point where nothing matters? And this is why I made the video earlier. Now, I don't know what happened with Roy Moore 50 years ago. I certainly don't understand why it took 50 years and the fact that he's about to, take office for it to come out. But this is why I've been very careful about what I've said and why I haven't jumped on the train. Do I think Harvey Weinstein's a great person? Absolutely not. I'm sure he's a scumbag. Reports are saying that he was spying on journalists and women. It sounds like a pure scumbag. But the reason I didn't jump on this story is because now I see why the media is doing it, or at least this is my idea of why they're doing it. At first, I was suspicious because I'm like, why would the New York Times break this story? No offense, but the New York Times has been a large portion of the fake news and misinformation. They lied about the 17 intelligence story for 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, and then buried the retraction. They were like, oh, we retracted it, but we're going to hide that so nobody really knows. They've been working hand in hand with the Washington Post for many anti-Trump stories that say, oh, an anonymous source said this, and Washington Post reported this, and New York Times reported that Washington Post reported, that CNN reported. It seems like they're all colluding to use anonymous sources, to use people like this woman, and just make their story. And here's what people need to understand. This is the reality of journalism and the reality of the state of the media that we work in. If the Washington Post writes something, if CNN writes something, if the New York Times writes something, if, whoever is considered a credible source writes a story and publishes it and, has paragraphs in there and no matter what the truth is, no matter what really happened in reality, people will believe it. Unfortunately, that's why they say to control someone, you control what they read, what they hear, and what they see. It's totally true. That's how the world works, unfortunately. And you would think that people had a shred of integrity, a shred of accountability, and with so much power and responsibility, you would assume that they would be very careful about what they put out. But since the Donald Trump election, maybe further, I wasn't paying attention, it's not that. It's 100%. They're trying to destroy people like Roy Moore. They're trying to destroy people like Donald Trump. Anyone that's not a part of their big team, the Hillary Clintons, the John McCains, the people who are funding the moderate rebels in Syria, Trump does the opposite, and now they're freaking out, and, anything against the pretty much power structure that they had in place, they're in an all-out attack against that. They don't care about the truth, and it's getting to the point where nothing matters. And I knew when the Harvey Weinstein stuff broke that there was a trap to it, and now I could clearly see the trap. Well, there are being great things being raised out of it. I know there's a lot of Hollywood people stepping up and really taking action, and that's great, because against real predators, I think that's necessary and that's healthy, and I'm very glad to see it. But once again, the elite media is doing the strategy of blaming other people for what you're actually doing and just make it so sloppy that none of this matters anymore. And this is why I made the video earlier. I would never blame a victim. I would never victim shame. But I'm going to be honest, because when they frame things in a light like this, there's usually a reason they're doing it. And if we continue on this path, it's not going to matter in a year. And now the people that are being hurt by social justice and are being hurt by, women and men and sexual abuse, it's not going to matter, because they frame everything out of proportion. And I know they do, because, to be honest, I've been deep diving for years, and even these stories, while I agree some of them, the Roy Moore one seems very suspicious, but once again, I'm not the I don't know Roy Moore, I don't know this woman, I don't know what he's done the past 70 years, and I certainly think it's a little strange that people are bringing up things from 50 plus years ago. To me, that's a little odd, but what I'm trying to say is, I know that they're blowing this stuff out of proportion. Even not to say that it's not bad, I'm not even saying that for a second, but the Harvey Weinstein and Louis C.K. thing, while in no way, shape, or form am I condoning that, I know for a fact that there's been billionaires who have raped 2-year-old kids and not seen a single day in jail. So when you're talking about the velocity of, oh my God, Louis C.K., once again, I'm not saying it's okay, but oh my God, he invited girls to his hotel room and would just jerk off in front of them. Like, am I saying, oh, that's great? No, not at all. But what's a worse crime? Louis C.K., and not to compare, but to compare, Louis C.K. jerking off in front of women in his hotel room, or a billionaire literally physically raping a 2-year-old baby. These are things that have been happening over the past 5 or 10 years, and I'm sure that they're still happening today in some places. Human trafficking is real. Pedophilia is real. These things are real. Child abuse is real. And we can't have a conversation about it, because the Democrats are so low that they're going to bring up a 50-plus-year-old accusation by someone who is a sign language interpreter for Hillary Clinton. So what happens when Harvey Weinstein, Louis C.K., this guy did this guy sent a picture of this happened 10 years ago, this happened. It's all, in my opinion, once again, I can't prove this, and I'm very honest. When I know everything, I say it, and when I don't. But it seems to me like they're trying to blow all of this stuff out so that they could get away scot-free when something like that does happen. And Google, what I'm talking about. I'm not going to name names, but a 2-year-old child literally raped 4 years ago, and nobody cared. I mean, I was reading the article, I cared, but I don't understand why people don't care about stuff like that. I mean, to me, that's the most disturbing. Those type of crimes exist. So when I hear all these accusation stories, I can't help but think, man, they're lying about some of them. Or some of them, there's a reason that they're doing it, even if it is bad and it is, criminal in some cases. Which ones are true? Which ones aren't true? And this is what I'm trying to say we have to be very careful about, because this is how real it is. If one person makes an accusation and goes to a news source and they write a big story, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, or even Fox News, whoever, BuzzFeed, it doesn't matter, Huffington Post, Newsweek, people will believe it. That's just how the world works. If I work for the Washington Post or I work for the New York Times and I write a story and I blast it out to people, people believe it like it's real. Even though the reality is, when you read a story, you're not there. You don't know the people involved. You're looking at a bunch of words on a computer and a few pictures. And the reason I know they're lying in a lot of cases is because I read the words and I read the pictures they're talking about, and they usually tell you in the article that they're lying. They'll use the big fake headline, like today they did, ooh, Trump shook hands with Putin wearing the same clothes. And Twitter, whoa, Trump shook hands with Putin wearing the same exact matching clothes. I told you that they colluded. Oh my God. And then you look at the real story and it's like, oh, everybody, all the world leaders were wearing the same uniform, and they all shook hands, and they all had a good time, and they all took pictures, because they've been doing it for the past 30 years. But these type of things, the truth doesn't matter to a lot of people, to most people. And it's not a partisan issue or a bipartisan issue. It is both sides, but there's something profound with the anti-Trump rhetoric, and the reason I talk about the left a lot more than the right is because when it comes to the flow of information and the power of the media, which is very important and incredibly influential, it's how we know things. If without that, we don't know a lot of things happening in the world. It is extremely right. You have Fox News, who is now, teetering on, telling the truth a lot of time, and sometimes they are definitely, just talking with right-wing situations, whatever. But that's all you have. And then you have, Breitbart and Alex Jones, and they got investigated by the FBI this year. Why? Because they were accused of being Russia. So that's how powerful an accusation is. You could just say, oh, they're Russian, and all of a sudden people believe Alex Jones and Breitbart are Russian. I mean, you could hate them, you could love them, but they're not Russian. They're American citizens, just like the 60-plus million American citizens who voted for Trump and the 20, 30-plus American citizens who voted for Bernie Sanders and got cheated. These people exist. It's why I'm getting massively popular. It's not because I'm doing anything ridiculous. It's because I'm telling more truth. I'm being more honest. I'm being more friendly. I'm being more open. And I'm reaching the biggest market in America. That's CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, act like doesn't exist. They keep lying, and you have a large portion of America who believes them, and they're like, oh, Russia hacked the election, Roy Moore did this, and nothing really matters anymore. And then 100+ million people are sitting there like, yo, you're losing your mind, you're just believing a bunch of lies. So this is how deceptive the news is. And when you read the whole article, you could tell when they know things, they'll tell you they know. If they say, oh, well, maybe, and if it happened, then he definitely has to step down. It's a trick for trying to kick him out. It's just like with Trump. With Donald Trump, I don't care if you voted for him. I don't care if you don't. But you have to understand they're trying to impeach him to get him out. They don't care about what really happened. If all of this stuff, with all of his accusations was true with Donald Trump, they would have been pushing that the whole time, and they would have been pushing him past the election. Man, all of these accusations against Donald Trump are true. He's a sexual predator. We got to get him out. But you notice, after the election, the sexual predator stuff with Trump stopped. They apparently didn't have enough information and proof, so where did that go? It disappeared, just like every story that they do, because they're not being very honest. It's 100% get him out of office so we can get back out in office. And that's not what it should be. When we talk about sexual predators, it should be for the purpose of stopping actual sexual predators and stopping child rapists and stopping people that, take advantage of people in the workplace. But they don't care about that. And it doesn't matter who you support politically. It's just the truth. Or else they'd still be talking about Trump and his sexual predator history, strongly. But they didn't. They went to Russia. Then it's Russia, and man, we can impeach him because of Russia, and all the investigations with Russia have turned up to be completely bogus. They're once again doing 7-year-old accusations against one of his campaign managers from 7-8 years ago. Meanwhile, they're getting caught funding millions of dollars to Fusion GPS, who's setting up meetings and paying for Russian dossiers, and there's a $130+ million backdoor deal, and all of a sudden 20% of the United States uranium is in the hands of Russia. This all happened during the Clinton-Obama administration, but nobody cares because that's how easy it is. And that's why I'll never be a Democrat again. I'm not a Republican, and I'm probably never going to be anything because I don't like labels, and I don't like playing a little sports game like, I'll believe anything because I don't like them, and I'm a Democrat, so let me believe all the fake news that New York Times and Washington Post puts out. It's ridiculous. That's all they need is anonymous source. And moving forward, I just want to say, we have to be very cautious with what we believe. We need to be very cautious with what we allow. And it's just so unfortunate that we're caught in this debacle because journalism should be journalism. We shouldn't have to worry about debunking every article. But that's how easy it is. I mean, I could come out, get 3 friends together, and say, oh my God, this woman or this man sexually assaulted me 10 years ago. And all it would take 3 or 4, I have, tens upon hundreds of friends, if not thousands of people I know. Get 3 or 4, go to a newspaper, they publish the story, and everyone will say, oh, well, it's not just 1, it's 2 or 3 or 4. I mean, come on, what's the chances of that? I mean, How easy is it to frame somebody? It's ridiculously easy. And I'm not saying that everyone accusing people now are true. I mean, with the Louis C.K. and the Harvey Weinstein and the Kevin Spacey, there's clearly mostly truth to that because they're all apologizing. And you have people like Seth MacFarlane through Family Guy and on speeches. He's been making jokes about Kevin Spacey and jokes about Harvey Weinstein for years. So clearly the whole industry knew they were sexual predators, and nothing about that's okay. But what I am saying is, we have to pay attention to what we do believe and not, because now that there are predators, there's people putting out the stories like, let's make it not matter. And I want that to matter. I want racism and social justice and environment, all these things that matter, but this is their tactics. I mean, literally, it's admittedly what they do. Blame the other person of what you're doing, so then it's all just a sloppy thing. And I take no joy, even when it's someone terrible. It's just bad energy to me. I don't like dragging everybody down. It's not a good vibe to me personally. So even when it's somebody like, oh, they're doing, I don't take joy. That's why you don't see me. I don't post that many negative articles. It's not that I don't see them. It's not that I don't appreciate them and know it's good for humanity. But I just don't like that type of energy personally. That's why I don't post about a lot of tragedies, and very rarely I post about stuff like that. But we do have to be careful, not only politically with stuff like this, but socially. What I see is a bunch of crabs in a bucket dragging each other down. You have politicians who will lie, cheat, and steal about anything on both sides to win an election, to, do whatever they want to do. You have journalists who are basically all like passive-aggressive rats who just lie, cheat, steal, and, occasionally tell the truth. But it's like their mission is not to elevate humanity. Their mission is not to boost people up and make people good. Most journalists take that job, sit behind a computer and a desk, write nasty articles passive-aggressively, just making fun of people. Like, I don't like it. That's why I don't like politics and journalism. I try to put my own spin on it because I don't like that much bad vibes and crab vibes. But that's what it is. So we have to be careful while we're outing, the most terrible people in society, the child rapists, the pedophiles, and the sexual abusers of high levels. It's all good for that. Like, I'm all for it, but we gotta have to watch. Like I said earlier, I feel like I'm ahead of the time, because a year later, I mean, what's gonna happen at this rate? You have everybody screaming, some people faking, some people telling the truth, everybody trying to drag each other down. You have a massive fight, the left and the right. I mean, it's a whole battle and a fight that I don't want to be part of. I definitely want to hold people who are really doing these terrible things accountable, but I don't co-sign to this crabs in a bucket mentality of let's left and right, whatever, just drag each other down at all costs, because at the end of the day, of course, there are high-level abusers and disgusting people who should be in jail for the rest of their life, but we all, there's something that we can say about all of us, and like I said, the high-level people certainly should be behind bars for the rest of their life, but we can't, this mentality of dragging each other down, to me, is a losing mentality amongst all the negativity. We need to, at the same time, build each other up and make sure that, we elevate each other and we evolve, because like, Bob Marley said, per se, don't point the finger at somebody when your hands are dirty, and everybody's hands are dirty to an extent. Everybody's made mistakes to an extent. Once again, not justifying all the disgusting, terrible things that a lot of high-level people are doing, but this mentality, that's why I don't like journalism, I don't like politics. I see it all bubbling up. I see Pandora's box being open, and in many ways, it is biblical and religious. Different religions, different spiritualities. People talk bad about religion, this and that. Man, they don't know what they're talking about. But you see a lot of these stories and a lot of the messages and a lot of the psychology and a lot of philosophy. It's playing out in real time. I mean, even as far as you look, one of the most, I guess, enticing things right now is the phone. I sit on my phone for 7-8 hours a day sometimes, and I don't even enjoy it sometimes, but I'm on Twitter, I'm checking this and that. You turn your phone around, it's a half-bitten apple. It's straight out of the Bible. It's truly biblical. So you could hate on religions, and me personally, I always show love to all religions. I say God bless everybody. But a lot of these symbols, a lot of these signs, these stories of the Tower of Babel and all of this, it's playing out in real time. The Pandora's box metaphor, it's all happening right now. The veil is being lifted, and it's a classic be careful what you wish for situation. So, while I do want to make sure that the bad people are outed, I do say, and especially like this, why I made this video with Roy Moore, I mean, let's take a closer look at this, because the guy beats an establishment candidate and all of a sudden he did something 50 years ago to a sign language interpreter who's worked for Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. I mean, smells a little fishy to me. That's why I made this video, and also to touch on everything that's going on, because I mean, I could see into the future as far as what is potentially to come, and it just seems like a be careful what you wish for situation to me. So let me know what you think. God bless you, God bless your family, God bless the world, and I have faith in humanity. I think it's a beautiful area. The veil is being lifted. It's going to get a little weird and get ugly, but I think it's going to get better. I think it's always gotten better. Like I say every day, I think these are the greatest times to be alive. I would love to see amongst all the hate and, you know, dragging people down, that's fine, but I would love to see more optimism in the world. I would love to see more gratefulness and appreciation, because I think with that type of energy, it would have an even bigger effect on the elevation of humanity. These are the greatest times to be alive. It's a blessing to be here, and thank you so much for joining and listening. I always truly appreciate everything, every like, comment, share, message. I'll check my messages soon. I've been kind of busy, and they're stacked up, but I'll take a day, probably tomorrow, and answer everybody's messages. I'm gonna post my link below if you'd like to donate. I'm 100% people funded and whatnot. Thank you for allowing me to have the time to even do stuff like this. Without the donations, I would not have the time to do barely any of this. But I would still probably do a lot of it, because that's where my soul is. Even before I started making money, I've been doing this. So thank you again. Have a good weekend. Thanks for considering, and let me know your thoughts.